Hi, I'm Laura Wild, and today I'm going to share with you some learnings from my research project, which is using co-creation online. So this presentation will share my experiences of doing online co-creation, specifically using the Zoom whiteboard, and how this is compared to doing the same co-creation activities face-to-face. So to give you some background to the research project that I'm doing, this is called the CoWise COPD study, and this aims to co-create information on using wearables for supported self-management with people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and healthcare practitioners. So the co-creators include people with COPD and people supporting people with COPD, including healthcare practitioners, researchers, friends, family, or caregivers of people with COPD. I'm going to talk you through the first phase of the CoWise workshops, which included one online Zoom whiteboard session and one face-to-face session. These workshops were explorative to co-define what information people need and also what that information might look like, covering some of the co-design stages too. So the Zoom whiteboard can be found on the Zoom app. So when you log in, it's at the top right of the bar at the top. And this is where I prepared the whiteboard in advance of the workshops. And then when you're hosting a call in Zoom, there's a button at the bottom of the screen where you can select the whiteboard you want to share with participants. So I set up the Zoom whiteboard in advance, which included multiple pages for different activities. So the first few pages of the whiteboard were to share information with the participants at the beginning of the workshop. As you can see here, this was the first page, which shows the CoWise and the Coventry University logo with a rough plan of the workshop activities. A simple version of this table was also emailed to participants in advance of the workshop. I added some pictures here to make it more visually appealing, and from here I explained how participants could navigate themselves onto the next page. So on the next page, I included a quick introduction activity for participants to get used to the Zoom whiteboard. I added the post-it notes already onto this page, so they just needed to add text rather than add the post-it notes as well. But potentially for other workshops, they could add their own post-it notes, change the colours, resize them, and even add their own other shapes, photos, or drawings onto the whiteboard. I wanted to just keep things simple to start with and get them used to the whiteboard. I also explained to participants how to navigate around the page, such as scrolling and zooming in and out. Overall, the information and introduction activity took around 20 minutes. So this is something to bear in mind for doing online co-creation activities, because compared to the face-to-face workshop that I did, which used similar activities, this initial introduction wasn't necessary and it was much quicker to get to the main activity. So this was the main activity of the workshop, which was to brainstorm what was needed for people with COPD and for people supporting people with COPD around using smartwatches. So what you see here is what I prepared in advance, and participants could add text to the post-it notes. Again, I already included some post-it notes on the whiteboard, so people didn't need to add them and they could just add the text. Again, I also included other pictures to make it more appealing, and included some definitions and some things to think about for participants as they were writing on the post-it notes. Participants engaged with the whiteboard initially to note their thoughts and ideas as people were talking. As the conversation progressed, the whiteboard wasn't used as much, but this may be reflected in the topics being quite broad anyway, and as participants were talking, they discussed lots of different ideas in much more detail. For the face-to-face equivalent, I drew out the same Venn diagram where participants could physically add post-it notes. Again, participants engaged really well with this, and over time, fewer post-it notes were added and there was mostly talking. With both the face-to-face and online workshops, the quieter participants were able to note their thoughts with the post-it notes, giving them an opportunity to share their views as well. What I found in these two workshops, the online and the face-to-face one for my project, was that people really did need some more information about using smartwatches to support their health and in healthcare. Participants discussed various formats and things that need to be included in the information, including some of the barriers and issues that may be faced with presenting information in certain ways. This is really helpful for me now to plan the next workshop to prioritise what information and what format the information needs to be in to continue with the co-creation process. Again, as you can see here, this is what I prepared in advance on the Zoom whiteboard. No participants added any text here, and they spoke about their thoughts instead. Participants at this point seemed really comfortable with sharing verbally, and so perhaps didn't feel the need to write anything down. So this is the face-to-face version of the workshop. You can see here that I drew out a similar picture to what was presented on the online whiteboard. Compared to the online group, participants in the face-to-face group did engage with this activity. In the online group here, we got some really good data on what they think that the project should look like and other ideas for other projects as well. Both the online and the face-to-face workshops worked really well and gave us some really great data to work with. So from conducting the online Zoom workshops, I also wanted to get some feedback from the participants on what they thought of the approach. So here you can see one participant said, "It seems people prefer to talk rather than having to summarise thoughts in sticky notes. I think the sticky notes have their own value in brainstorming when a team is optimising for coming up with new ideas." The other participant said, "I think you would have done just as well with a PowerPoint and let people talk, which is what we mainly did anyway." I should also note here that there was one participant who didn't engage with the whiteboard due to difficulties typing on their keyboard. They were more used to using their phone and tablet keyboard and so found their physical keyboard quite difficult. However, this didn't seem to hinder their contribution and they were okay with just talking about their views and perspectives. So just to note some pros and cons here to using the online whiteboard compared to the face-to-face workshop. Although, as the feedback suggested, I could have just used a PowerPoint presentation instead of using the Zoom whiteboard, I felt that the Zoom whiteboard got participants thinking and talking very quickly. The whiteboard was also a good visual and something for participants to look at and refer to throughout the workshop. They were also able to freely add their thoughts and comments as other people were talking, and this gave them an opportunity to share their views even if they didn't want to talk. They could also go back to other pages and navigate themselves through each of the Zoom pages, so that didn't restrict them to just what I was presenting and showing them. There also seemed to be a really good equal contribution from both healthcare practitioners and patients in the online workshop. However, there are some cons to the online Zoom whiteboard as well. Compared to the face-to-face equivalent, it took much more time to get set up and for everyone to feel comfortable with using the whiteboard. Also, participants didn't really use the whiteboard as much as I'd hoped, and it just generally turned into a conversation anyway. However, this could be due to the broad nature of the activities and questions, and perhaps more specific activities would encourage participants to use the whiteboard more. Finally, no one really engaged with the final Zoom activity. Like I said, at this point, everyone was really comfortable talking, so we still got some really good data, even though nothing was necessarily written down on the post-it notes. In terms of next steps for this project, I have started analysis of the first two workshops to prepare for the next workshop to co-create the information for people with COPD and healthcare practitioners. Later workshops will explore, including the ideas which have come up in the first 2 workshops, to specifically look at what the content of the information is and what format the information should be in. Early ideas have been suggested to be a leaflet or a video, and so later workshops will start to prototype what this information looks like and develop the information to be most suitable for people with COPD and healthcare practitioners. So just to summarise, using the Zoom whiteboard worked really well to initially explore what people with COPD and healthcare practitioners need to use smartwatches for self-managing COPD. It was really helpful to be able to prepare the Zoom whiteboards in advance. Although using the Zoom whiteboard took a little bit more time to explain and get people used to using it, it supported the discussions in the workshops really well. I feel that using the Zoom whiteboard yielded equivalent data compared to the face-to-face workshop. I'm looking forward to conducting the next workshops to be able to co-create information for people with COPD and healthcare practitioners. Thank you so much for listening.